feels more like I've got a bit of a crowd if there's a few images to see. But thank you very much for turning up to my session. I am coming to you from the lands of the Worimi people, which is basically in Foster, New South Wales. And what I'm going to be talking about is, hello, Kate. What I'm going to be talking about today is, in fact, whilst it is about change management in one sense, it's actually more about the transitions associated with it. And so I'm just going to see if I can share my screen right now. Where is it? There. Yep. And hopefully this should appear. Okay, so basically what I'm looking at is transitions as they impact people through the change management process. I will be sharing the slides and a one-pager in the chat, and I'll also be sending those through to Adele as well for those people who couldn't attend but are going to be watching the recording. The other thing I would generally say is I'm very happy for you to take questions as we go. Depends how the rhythm is. If there's a bit to cover, so I might say we'll look at those at the end. And I believe from Adele we've got a bit of a flexible time frame, which is sort of 1 o'clock-ish. I'll aim for that, and we'll see how it goes from there. So, and feel free to take yourself off mute if you want to ask a question as well. I'm pretty damn comfortable in the Zoom space. We all are nowadays. So what I wanted to tell you and give you an example of is, in fact, I'll stop sharing that for now, is the time in which I really became aware that we needed more than the traditional models. What had happened was in 2020 or 2016, 2017, all the way through for some years to follow, I was part of an amalgamation between what turned out to be 4 bodies, 3 councils, which was Greater Taree, Great Lakes, and Gloucester, and also the Water Authority. So they amalgamated all of us, and in order to help the leadership through this, and it was something that a lot of people didn't want. Okay, so you've got to understand a context where this is happening. There was a lot of stress. There was a lot of uncertainty about what was going to happen, who was going to keep their jobs. It had been, as much as anything, a political decision taken out of the local council's hands. So that's the context it was operating in. When the senior leadership team was put in to try and implement this change that had come upon us, we were given ProSci as a tool. So you might be familiar with the ADKAR framework, which is awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and the R is kind of refresh, reinforce, revisit. It's actually a pretty good change management tool. The problem was that we were told, here is your solution to, all of this distress and confusion in the workplace is go out and ADKAR them, okay? And how do you think that went? So pretty much, it's a good tool, but it missed a point. And a lot of the stress that was still in the workplace there, it wasn't resolving it. Sometimes it would actually heighten it. People get cranky and say, why haven't you moved on? There was a lot of this expectation that people would just accept, and it happened. It was a done deed. And yet so many people seem to be caught in their own traps or in the traps of the context. That's when I started reading around. And that's when I came across the work of William Bridges. And I'm going to go back to sharing my screen again now. And what the revelation really in reading him was that he spoke about transitions, not change. I'm just going to read that quote out. Change is something that happens to people even if they don't agree with it. Transition, on the other hand, is internal. It's what happens in people's minds as they go through change. So transitions is about the process people go through, whereas change and change management, which are great tools, are about the process itself and it's external to people. Sometimes people are interested in the change and keen for it. Sometimes they're not. And as William Bridges, now, if I'm going to recommend anybody, look into the work by William Bridges on transitions. He says it isn't the change that will do you in, it's the transitions. Now, today, what I'm going to be doing is, so I'm just trying to move my screen around a bit. Today, what I'm going to be doing is pretty much distilling his work because it's still topical, it's still seminal. You can buy or read the book if you like. You can save yourself some time because the content that I've worked on should synthesise everything that Bridges has done. The other thing, of course, is that this is kind of my line of work now, is in the space of looking for leadership, looking for materials on human behaviour, social dynamics, because typically these are the big players in any workspace. So, and one of the things that I would say is people will often tar others and say, or tar people with the same brush of saying, oh, you've just got to rip the Band-Aid off, and some people are resistant to change. That's not true. Okay. Nobody per se is resistant to change. There are plenty of changes that people accept and are even looking forward to. It's changes where things are for the good. You know, if somebody gives you a pay increase you weren't expecting, or you don't have to go to that session that you didn't want to go to, or your family have had a surprise birthday party for you, they're all change. And you will probably, in most instances, love them. So, what it is about change is when people are uncertain and when they perceive that it is bad. So, really try and avoid the concept of saying people are change resistant. They're going through a challenge in their transition associated with change. And this is what you need to work through with people. Having the ADCAR, having the change management system, that's great. I'm not speaking against them. I'm actually saying you need another set of tools sitting beside the change management one. So this will be a transitions framework. Before I go any further, and I really would like some feedback here from you guys, I'm going to have a look at what sort of change people could confront in their lives. It's really important that we actually spend a few minutes just in this space, and I'd love you to put it into the chat as to what sort of change could people confront in their lives. And I've separated out. So I've got the personal change, there's work change, and there could be external change. Okay. So, and just to kick things off, as I said, I'd love you to sort of put things in here. You know, you might find that in the personal life, somebody's leaving home. In the workspace, separation, death. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, exactly. What about this favourite word? Restructuring, new job. Okay, so you've got people with new jobs, restructuring, people moving home. What about if we said, just for the heck of it, war in Iran? Okay, that's a change. We are flying. I'm leaving the country, and I'm flying to Turkey on Monday. I can tell you right now, there's a little bit of anxiety around what airspace we might be flying through. So thank you, Vanessa. New workplace location. What else can you think of? So new staff, yeah, new manager, new staff. These are classic areas where it's particularly challenging. You may not know them at all. Or in the case of amalgamation, it was I picked up somebody else's staff and they picked up me as well. And that was a whole nother level of complexity. You might have you might have a change in health. Okay, somebody might get sick. Last year, my mother, out of the blue, nearly died from a weird E. coli thing. Totally changed my life for some months. Um, you might find, I'm just looking to a list, that you might be moving house. I know a few people where that's happened. But so as you start to see, these are all changes that people are having to adapt to. And a lot of them are powerful and emotional things. And if you're trying to use partner, family, changing role, yeah, exactly. If you are trying to then say, okay, great, I've got this change management tool. First of all, are you aware of what's happening? Um, what is your desire for change? What knowledge can we give you for that? Now, I'll give you a classic example of even where organisations, and this is not trying to have a go at any particular one, it's just a habit organisations do, is when they bring in change and they even know the outcome model and they talk about we need you to make people aware, well, we've told you. That's step one, which is a really quick way. Our desire, it's going to happen, so get used to it. There you go, tick the desire box. We're going to go straight into knowledge. So I'll give you some training on the systems you need to use. So they classically leap straight into the knowledge without really appreciating the transitions people are going through. So there's quite a few. Fairly, thank you for all people who popped stuff in. I'm just going to, hopefully, this will work. So these were ones that I just popped out of my head. Again, I was fiddling around with this just this morning. So big one, technology, AI, but it may not be just AI. It could be you've got a new LMS and you knew the old one backwards, and now they're bringing in a new one. It might the restructuring, changing roles, changing teams, changing entire careers, approaching retirement. So there's an interesting one we'll look at. And on the lifestyle, health, family, moving house, different ones appear at different stages of life. And that's also a really important realization. External ones, global forces, as I was talking about the war in Iraq, but change of government. Think of the profound amount of change going on in America at the moment, courtesy, imagine if you're working in the public sector over there. That totally came out of the blue, the Doge going through, the restructuring, the getting rid of staff. So you can have that. Changes in the environment. Last year, everything was rolling along tickety-boo in this area. Then we had a 1 in 500-year flood. Okay, we've had bushfires. There can be heat waves. We've had cyclones. All of those represent a significant change context. Disasters. So I've got environment and disaster there as well, and also financial collapse. So by that, as an example, the stock markets are pretty interesting at the moment. So maybe that's impacting on when you think you might change jobs. Who knows? You might feel a lot more insecure at the moment, and you were really secure last year. You're not so secure at this time. Just want to check I'm tracking okay for time. So there's an example of plenty of possibilities. You can find more, I'm sure. The point here is there are a lot of them. And each person is unique in the combination that they have. Doesn't mean you can't get to, in fact, you do need to get to know them, but you almost certainly don't know all of their circumstances. So I wanted to also, now this is another layer that sits on top of, if we look at those all of those changes that can occur in your work life, personal life, and external, you also have stage of life transitions. And this may look a bit similar if you're thinking about it to the Maslow's hierarchy of need. So in the Maslow's hierarchy of need, as we go through, we look for safety and security, and then you build up and you get some status, and then ultimately you get to self-actualization, which is when you are interdependent. And this happens with people as well. So the dependent stage is obviously childhood. It is the classic dependent family stage, but it also is often for new staff. They will be going who are new to the whole work context. They are going to be highly dependent on their colleagues, highly dependent on the systems that are in place. They don't know how things work yet. Even if you have been in the workforce for a while and you move to a totally new workforce, you may find you had been independent and you've shifted back to a lot more dependency. Independent is when, and William Bridges would talk about this, where you've kind of established your career and now you're starting to, you know, build it up. You might be going to conferences, people are asking your advice, you've got staff now that you're taking responsibility. You have a fair degree of confidence around your known world. You have confidence in yourself and your own ability. Then what happens curiously towards the end or the latter stages of life, and you can certainly see this in the working career as well, is that people start wanting to create meaning. And by that, there's a lot around leaving a legacy behind. The traditional model of people wanting to, say, just get to retirement, work, work, work until you're almost dead, then you retire and everything comes good again, is shifting. And that shift is happening around us and continues to be so, that people are no longer looking at retirement solely as and I'm never going to work again. There's a growing interest of people who get to a certain age. I'm a classic example of that, where technically I could have retired, but I still wanted to contribute more. And I also wanted to, in a sense, affirm that what I'd done had value to me and those around them, and that I still wanted to contribute. So that latter stage can be actually quite a bit messy, where people are trying to decide whether or not they really want to leave. Do they want to leave totally? What do they want to leave behind? What meaning do they want to make of their life that's gone before? So what motivates in one stage is not necessarily the same as what motivates in another. So if we look back on that list of all those contexts and all those changes, you might find, say, AI is a classic one. You might find that somebody who is very early on in their workplace journey and AI is coming in might actually be leaning into that. Might be really interested in what that means. But somebody who's in an independent stage actually may be threatened by it and go, no, I really know my world, and now you're bringing this in. Somebody at the latter stage may either feel threatened or go, okay, all right, here's an opportunity to learn something more. So you just don't know in those contexts, or people will behave differently. So knowing that what stage your team might be at, knowing if they're new kids on the block, or if they've been there for a while, or if they're approaching the end of their working career, or at least of their current style of working career, then you can work with them on going through these, transitioning through these. I just want to, making sure I'm on time. Yep. So I'm just giving you a bit of an example. I literally wrote this morning. So, and I don't know Um, I'm leaving it up to you to read, um, to give me the answers. So you're a staff member who's approaching the end of your career. They are not sure when that will be because your superannuation is being hammered by global uncertainty, which is certainly occurring at the moment. And you've also got the kids living at home for a while. They can't afford the rent. Then there's your mother's health. And everyone is talking or not talking about the upcoming restructure. And your manager wants you to embrace AI. Okay. If you look at that, you go, what change? And I'd invite you to put something in chat or you can come off your mics and say what you like. What changes can you see that are implied in that context? The transitions. Now, the reason I share this with you as you put stuff in is that William Bridges talks about life quakes. So life quakes are when multiple transitions hit you at once. So if you look at that, you go, all right, what's a transition happening there? Well, AI, okay? It's a classic one. Well, what else? Kids at home, kids moving at home. So your personal structure's changing, um, your financial situation's changed. And if you look at that and you go, oh, that does that really happen? It's probably happening to somebody. Do elements of it resonate with you? I'm going to think that they do. That you know, people approaching the end of career, um, kids moving home, so you've got family structure changing at the same time. They can't afford rent. You may actually be supporting them financially. Dig a bit deeper. What about your mother's health? What state is that in? What are you going to do? How are you going to care for her? That's changing. And the restructuring. Okay. It's hard not to know a workplace that isn't going through restructuring. A lot of the coaching work I do involves dealing with restructures and, in fact, more specifically, in dealing with how people are dealing with restructures. So the whole transition thing is helping people to deal with their experience of the change. We're going for time, 12:40. Okay. So what I want, so given that context, you can have life quakes. What is transitions? And this is where the real nuts and bolts of the toolkits actually, or the techniques you can take with you occur. There are three stages in transition. There's an ending, a neutral zone, and the beginning. And the really profound material that came out of William Bridges' work is that you don't start with new beginnings, you start with endings. You don't get to a beginning until you have ended your current state. Okay, so what that means, I just want to give me, I'm just changing over my notes. Um, the beginning actually comes last. So if you take nothing else away from this, then when people are going through a change and you're implementing change management, the things they will be dealing with first are endings, not beginnings. So the whole idea of saying, rip the Band-Aid off, just start afresh is is not how most people, really everybody, will deal with it. Some are quicker at going through endings than others, just as through sort of the process of grieving, people can move quicker or slower than others, but everybody has to start with the endings. And I'm just going to open that up a little bit further. So if there's, as I said, if there's nothing else you take away, remember every new beginning starts with an ending. We are drawn to fresh starts. Sometimes you just say, I can't bear this anymore. Let's just get this thing rolling. And I've been doing some reading around trauma recovery. And one of the most critical things for people is to acknowledge, even though it's really painful and what you want to avoid, what happened in the trauma. They need to resolve that before they can move on. So there can be multiple things to end. Another really powerful thing to be aware of is that anything unended will remain a loose end. And that will keep reminding you of it. And they can be hidden. Okay. So again, I'll give my own personal example of this. So when I left my last full-time permanent place of work, I had, this was the amalgamation space, full of really good people trying to do their best, but a really challenging environment to operate in. And I had decided that I would leave on a high note. I had worked through a lot of this with the endings. I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have these all sorted. And a lot of the kind of things that I needed to sort out, I did. So I'd sort out my finance, I'd do this, whatever else. Um, and when I left, for about 6 to 12 months afterwards, I realized that there are emotional elements that had not ended, and that there were frustrations that I had kind of kept to myself, as it were, and thought I was dealing with while I was in the space. And yet I had a lot of emotions I needed to process and get out of my system about the whole amalgamation process. Not just the last, how I walked out the door, but how I had experienced the whole journey. And the interesting thing that I've found is that as others have left the amalgamated workspace, I typically find that they are going through the same journeys themselves. So they are having to process, they have not ended them, the emotions. Like they'll start talking about something and I'll think, yeah, I know how that feels. I know that frustrated me. Why didn't I get over it? Because I was still having to process the ending. So be very aware of that. The other thing that I would say is, whilst some people move quickly through the ending stage, be observant of anybody that moves very quickly, okay? Because there's a really good chance they've got things that they have not been able to confront and end. They could be quite emotional things. So really, the ones that you think might be really on top of it all may in fact be bottling a lot. So you've got to be able to give them the chance and encourage them to really look at what hasn't ended. And the questions William Bridges would ask is, what are the things, so take this one away, what are the things we have to end? And there is an we component to it. And Bridges goes even further and says, what am I going to lose? Because there will be losses. And the other thing he would say is, what do I have to let go of? Okay. So when you're thinking about it, the endings, you need to invest a lot of time and be prepared for people to take their time going through that. Now I'm going to talk. He spoke about the endings, the neutral zone, and then the beginning. So the neutral zone he also calls the fallow time. This is where you need to process things. You need to have time to be able to deal with what's hit you. Okay? So in the neutral zone, he did a heap of research on people who'd gone through dramatic change, or change, basically. And he had said that he had found that these particular aspects absolutely were essential parts of the neutral zone. Don't have to have all of them, but you may well find you dip into all of them at different times. You don't rush through the neutral zone. So that whole ripping the band-aid off is also not good advice. Okay. You need to be able to, when you need people to be able to move through, but if you try and rush them, they won't have ended and processed before they can begin. So take your time and accept you need it. Arrange temporary structures. So for people who might be leaving work, like myself, you might want to think, what am I going to have in between? Or if you've been made redundant, God forbid, okay, it's really tempting to then leap into the first job you come across, okay, because you don't want the ending. But the ending's happened. What you need to do is, or you have as an option, is a temporary structure. So you might take a job, but it doesn't have to be the final one. Or you might take some leave, or you might go on holidays to process or whatever. But if you're trying to leap from one job to another, chances are the transition's going to get you. Similarly, don't act for the sake of acting. So have temporary structures. Don't feel you have to rush through to the next thing. Time is going to be your friend in this space. And one of the things people often overlook is health and well-being in this space. I was coaching somebody who's going through a major transition. And one of the things she actually took away at the end of the session, and she had not been looking after herself. She'd stopped going to the gym. Time with the family was kind of almost a hassle space. She wasn't giving herself time. So action she decided to take out of that was walk on the beach more, get back to the gym, and just focus on family time when it was family time. So take care of yourself. It'll actually fuel you up more for when you're ready to begin. Explore the other side of the situation. So this is really perspective shifting is what you're trying to do, is what are some of the opportunities within this space? Now, I'm not a big one for rah-rah, but I also know that in transition times, you can bring them a completely negative mindset. So you want to be able to give a bit of breathing space to looking for the opportunities as well. Find someone to talk to. This is an exceedingly important and common scenario. And for example, when I was still trying to end my connection with the former work, the amalgamation process, I did find talking to somebody and talking it through was great. So if you've got staff or if you yourself are going through something, there is no shame. There's actually great value in finding somebody to speak to. This one is one I haven't so much engaged with, but I keep hearing about it as a tool that people use is keep a journal for reflection. So I'm a big fan of reflection. I haven't kept a journal, but I do reflect at the end of every day and at the start of each month. So that can be a really useful tool for people because, again, brings perspective. They can see the words on the paper. Find a place to be alone. So the person I was coaching who just wanted to spend some time walking on the beach. Just give yourself some time. Be kind to yourself in this space. And if you are thinking about your staff, don't necessarily always try and be on their back saying, oh, how are you going? Sometimes they need that time alone. It's the best thing for them. Also, going back to find someone to talk to, yes, you've got to manage, water cooler discussions that are, working against where you want a place to be. But don't shut down conversation completely. Encourage the right, helpful kind of conversation. Quite often, and for me, this was a big one, particularly at the latter stages, is what did I really want? It's quite surprising how much when you say, so what do you really want here? It's a classic coaching question. People actually don't know what they want. So if you explore what you really want, you might actually start finding you're exploring the other side of the situation too. And that what you really want perhaps wasn't being served as much as you think in your previous place, and maybe there are opportunities in this one. So it's about looking for possibilities and perspectives. Think positively as the transition is a fertile time out. So look at the space, don't rush it. As I keep saying, William Bridges said, the more you rush, the more likely you are not to end things, and the more likely you are not to be prepared for the beginning. And really importantly, the more you leave behind, the more you'll have room. Sorry, I've got stuff on my slide to, I'm going to read it up here. The more you leave behind, the more room you'll have for something new. Do what you do attentively, not distractedly. So try not to take, and we know the decluttering thing, how much do you need to take forward with you? That's part of the ending process. Life, and I've been doing a bit of work in this space, life and leadership space and workspaces are highly complex, much more complex than they once were. Simple is handy if you can make things simpler. So really think about and think about with your staff, what do you need to leave behind? I've had really practical examples of this when my father-in-law passed away, and he was a great collector of things. He's wonderful, absolutely beautiful man. And he left so much of the stuff in the house. And it was a real challenge for the family to figure out what to do with things and whether things had great value or didn't have great value, or what to do with them and who wanted them and so on. So whilst that is a very specific example of it, it really drove home to me that there is value in being able to shed things and also on behalf of other people. Now, the next slide, hopefully this will work, is really, I don't have a lot to say on the beginnings. Neither did William Bridges. Because once you have handled the endings effectively, once you have gone through your transition zone, your neutral zone, your fallow space, fallow time, you are then prepared for the new beginning. Okay. So that's the model. All right. It works. And I will share a one-pager with you so that you can take with you on how to make sure you remember to go through in this process, and also the tips for the fallow space. The reality is somewhat different as well. And as you can imagine, the time that it takes to go through this, I've said take time. What happens is that the world doesn't traditionally give you time. Okay? Change is now happening faster and newer things are emerging all the time. You may not end one thing before another hits you. Okay. And as an example, last year I thought, yeah, I'm going to keep my vision shorter because the world's complex. I'm going to have an 8-week plan. And I threw out the 8-week plan after 2 weeks because in the first 2 weeks we had catastrophic flooding in the region. My mother nearly died. My son that is living overseas and we thought would never come home again said, I'll see you in a month or two. And everything changed. So also what I'd be saying is absolutely be mindful of reality and that you may not be able to fully process one transition before the next one hits you. Having said that, the above process is still the best one for you. And a tip is don't try and deal with all the changes at once. Resolve all the changes at once. You'll still have to cope with them as best you can. Try to focus on one as much as possible and park the transitions for the rest. So don't say, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to deal with them all at once, or I don't need to deal with that one. Just put them aside because you will need to deal with them. And the other thing you'll need to accept is that things will get in the way. So if you have a bit of stoicism about you and go, what can I control in this space? Really, how rapidly changing are things? That I'm just gonna, there's a message that you will be better presented. And we can talk as much as we like about tools afterwards. I can actually do tools as well, other tools to deal with change as it happens, but this is the transition space. Just lost my crowd. I am pretty much at the end of the session. Rachel has got to go. Yep, the recording is sweet. Any questions, please? Are we all good? I'm just checking. I can't. Nothing in the chat? Yep. No.
No, no
Sweet.
questions, but great
Okay.
feedback.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do now, folks, is I will dump in the chat. Um, Basically, I did have the folder open, but it's shifted. I will put in the chat both my notes and also the one pager. Okay. All right. And I'll send those through to you as well, Adele.
Thank
So
you.
that's good. All right. So I think I'm done.
Anyone misses those, they know that they can get them from me, and I'll send out an email letting people know I have
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. Oh, and look, the other thing I should say is if people want to reach out to me, I've got my own website. I should just go into a quick share screen. Um, I always forget to even mention that this is my neck of the woods. So if you're interested, I've got a website. You can email me. I worked in libraries for years. My heart lies in libraries. I'm very happy to give back. So if you've got any issues around teams going through transitions or yourself, um, I'm quite happy to do some really practical work in that space or in goal setting that works, that kind of stuff. So, okay. All right, Adele.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Chris. That was
Thank you.
fantastic.
No,
Everyone, just a reminder that this session has been recorded and I will make it available to everybody as usual. I'll send an email out when that has happened. And just thank you, Chris. That was great. I'm sure everyone's picked something up along the way. So thank you, and I will see you all next week. Next week we have our fifth session, and it's with the Department of Health on health programs and different information that they have for libraries. So another interesting session that will assist you in providing information to your customers. So thank you again. Bye.